Other questions, comments? Ms. Hiller?
Well, I have had a lot of them. I sent some in advance to staff just to try and put some to rest. It put a couple things to rest, but also raised issues that I had not expected. So overall, I want to say how much I appreciate the financial analysis work, which is pretty much how the presentations were done. And I also appreciate the investment in the cost of use study. I know it's been challenged, but even those who have challenged it have felt that it had value, that there were good things in it. I also, on behalf of us as well as the citizens, want to point out something I have before, which is $1 a month rate increase is the equivalent of a mill property tax increase for somebody with a $100,000 house, and for somebody who's got a $25,000 property, it's the equivalent of 4. And so I know that we need to do something, but I want us to be really conscientious about how much, minimizing that and offsetting or protecting against other rate increases if we can. So out of that, and I did go to one of the hearings and have had a fair amount of input, as I think others have as well. It seemed to me that our constituents were saying, please calibrate it on the cost rating of the users as much as possible. And second, a lot of the questions from constituents really were non-financial. I think you did a good job with the financial, but they also wanted to know, are we running a good shop? Are we running an excellent organization? Do we have plans? Are we using our staff and our equipment as effectively as possible? And I'm not sure we did answer those questions, and I think that we should. Not that we wouldn't go forward, but to make sure that how much we think mileage we'll get out of these raises, and so on. So I'll share with you briefly what I learned from staff. I have a couple of long emails, but I have 6 things that I would like to see us as a council and staff address before we would pass this rate increase. The first one was that I did ask about what our personnel count was from 2008 to today. We've cut substantially, and I asked what sort of efficiencies we had and what we were planning in terms of use of staff and staff teams and vehicles and so on. To my surprise, our staff levels have increased by 13 since 2008, fairly steadily. Instead of finding out that we were doing more with less or whatever, I found that they've increased steadily. In many cases, as it turns out, picking up staff from other departments. I think that we need to, and then I asked about future efficiencies, and I really got just some generic conversation about best practices and monitoring cost effectiveness and so on. But really no reports of things that had been implemented and specific strategies that were on deck for the future. So first, I really would like to see staff review the staffing levels and efficiencies in delivering services before we proceed. I'd like to be convinced that that planning is there, and to my dismay, I am not at this point. I asked about how much of the capital improvement plan that the mayor referenced, where there is system growth, how much is going to be spent on existing infrastructure and how much on expansion at the edges of the city? And the answer was 25% is expansion and 75% in the city. It is what it is. We've made commitments, but I would like to see us review whether other sources of funding might be available for any expansion costs that would not be self-sufficient or pay for themselves in a reasonable period of time. In particular, we have assumed a lot of costs because of the development of the industrial parks south. And we've spent money, and then we also have millions of dollars on deck to expand fire service and water service and so on. I'd like to see us look and see if we could identify other sources for those major expenses. Third, Back in April of 2013, the last time we funded utility bonds, we did a major refunding. We saved a lot of money, and the official report from staff was that we would save $3.2 million on the refunding of those utility bonds. And that we structured it so we got that pretty much up front rather than over a period of time, given the economic times that we were in. My recollection is that the commitment from the staff was that $1 million of those proceeds was going to go to the general fund instead of stay in the utilities. And if in fact that happened, I would like to see that checked. At this point, we have upped our fund balances on the general fund side. If there is utility money that went over, I'd like to see it come back to the utilities. Fourth, the commercial rates in the latest proposal that we have, that we saw up on screen and that we've been looking at. And in that proposal, the commercial rates were and remain substantially under what Raftellus said for a typical cost of use they should be. The residential rates, on the contrary, in the proposal that we have in front of us are higher, rise substantially and end up higher than what Raftellus said the cost of use should be. I would like to see staff look at what might happen if we ticked those commercial rates up slightly. I understand major impact, but if we ticked the commercial rates up slightly and correspondingly adjusted the residential back down a little bit. I did play with that at one point and got it to balance, but I'd like staff to see what they could find. If we don't do that, I've given a lot of thought to the residential families. It's not just minimum users. It could be the Gerbers that don't have that great city job, lots of kids using water and so on. I'd like to see us consider putting a little more money in the rebate program for lower income families. And generally, I've not really been that favorable about that program, but I can see, since the family size and use could really vary, that rebate might be the best way to protect our lowest income users. Fourth, in terms of, well, I did ask how the stormwater utility was doing, and the answer was we're still watching that. We really don't want to raise those rates. We do have the levy, however, coming up. We need $4.1 million for that. If we could protect the overall rates as well as the specific utility rates, I'd like to see us do that. So my last two have to do with that. One would be contacting the county and asking the county if they are at a point where they could consider rolling back the recycling rate on refuse. As we all know, that's stacked into that bill. So when people's bills go up, they look to us. But that county rate went up $4 a month. And when they first were talking about doing recycling, they talked about not raising rates at all. Then they talked about raising it just on the folks who didn't use the recycling, but having it be no rate increase for the people that did. Ultimately, they decided to just do the $4 overall. I'd like to see us inquire how they're doing with that fund and whether there's a possibility to roll it back. Again, in this plan, we're not raising anybody more than about $1 to $2 a month. If that refuse rate could roll back correspondingly, it would help our citizens. And last, even though stormwater isn't part of this rate increase, it's right out there on the horizon, and if we could minimize that, I would like to do that. My last suggestion would be that we again visit with the county in terms of a mutual agreement about how to use the remainder of the current countywide half-cent sales tax. There is expected to be at least $6 million, maybe more, if they were willing to agree and we could commit $1.9 million of that for the weir improvements that we're looking at on the river for safety on that weir, and the other 4.1 for the other half of the levy match money that we need to come up with, so we don't have to accumulate it or borrow it. I think it would help secure that stormwater for our ratepayers. Thank you, and I do have that in writing so that people can see it.
Council members, why don't we break from our discussion and have our public comments right now. And the first person to speak is Teresa Miller.
Good evening again. Thank you. I'm Teresa Miller, North Topeka West NIA, but I'm here also as just in person. I am living on a fixed income. Everybody in my house is on a fixed income. So that kind of scares me when it increases. And let me tell you, the presentation that you all received tonight is not the presentation that the public got at the meetings. This has been buffered in 100% better. Because when I looked at certain areas of this, when you did the rate increases, it didn't say $3 and some odd cents per 1,000 gallons. There was no 1,000 gallons up there. I was freaking out from the $15 that you were taking away, and then we had 1,500 gallons. And then you went to, we're going to pay this $9.83 a month with 0 gallons, and I'm like freaking out. It didn't say $3 and something per 1,000 gallons on it. So in my head, I'm like, how am I going to pay my water bill? So in that area, it's different. There is a few things that's different. A lot of things are really, really explained tonight to you that was really not explained like that to the public, at least the 2 meetings that I went to. So I understand a lot more, so I had a lot more questions for you. I don't have any more. But one thing I did bring up at one of the public meetings was the stormwater runoff. Because when we originally was charged that, we were told a certain percentage of that was going to pay for infrastructure and fixing the broken pipes. But at the meetings, they looked at me like I was an alien when I mentioned that. So now it's being brought up, because that's what originally was about. I also remember Joe Ledbetter coming up in front of you several times telling you you need to address that stormwater problem because residents are being charged, a lot of residents were being charged the wrong amounts, and the businesses were not even being charged nearly the amounts of money they should be paying. So there is a lot of money right there. I don't know if it's been fixed, but there is still a problem with that because I've never really heard it being addressed. So if we're looking for money, that is one area that needs to still be looked at because I don't think it's been fixed. So, but my main concern is that, I understand we need a rate increase. I really do understand that. But I'm really worried also for the people that don't have the funds to pay their bills and how they're going to do it, because this is going to keep going up and up and up. People on Social Security are just recently in the last few years got a very little small increase. Social Security for a long time sat there with no increases while everything else went up. So that's my main concern. Is my Social Security going to go up in the needs of how fast your water and your utilities are going to go up? Because I don't think it will. So that's my main concern. So as I leave this, I would like you to look into the stormwater a little more. I want to know where that money goes. I want to know how much it's going to go to help out. I need to have you look at the commercial company, businesses, because a lot of them are not paying what they should be paying, and there's some more money there. So that's just a few things I want to bring up. But I really appreciated the presentation that you all had tonight because it did answer a lot more questions than what the public got in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments and
You're welcome.
your compliments to Mr. Gerber for his good presentation this evening. The next person to public speak is Jeff Russell. Mr. Russell.
Hey y'all, my name is Jeff Russell. I'm a general manager at Research Fine Foods. I've spoken to some of you and met with city staff on this issue. We're a major industrial employer and user of the Topeka water and sewer system. We employ about 1,100 full-time employees plus 100 or so temp workers at our facility. For us to be competitive, we require economically competitive, consistent quality, and an uninterrupted flow of water. We run a very water-intensive business. Potato salad and mashed potatoes is very water-intensive. While none of us wants to see our costs increase, we do see the need that the city has to maintain its infrastructure. The number of water main breaks is climbing due to the lack of a long-term replacement strategy. Some areas of the city are prone to red water, have been in the past. This situation is not sustainable for the manufacturing group in Topeka. Both current and prospective manufacturers in Topeka require a consistent, high-quality supply of water. The water must be priced competitively for us to maintain and grow our operations in Topeka, thus employing more residents who pay taxes and spend money in our city. We do not agree with all the assumption that the Raftellus study has. We feel the comparisons used for costing do not represent the experiences of many of us in the industrial class. For instance, I shared with staff some of our sister plant costing, and while I don't look at what the cost of water is, I take a look at the volume that we use and divide it by however much the bill is. And we're within 3 to 5% of the plants that we compete with inside our organization for pounds. Those pounds are jobs for Topekans. The locations that we compared ourselves to is our home office in Beaverton, Oregon, and one of our power plants in North Carolina. We do not believe it's prudent to go to a cash basis, as some of the Raftellus folks have suggested, for repairs and maintenance. These repairs and maintenance activities are going to benefit ratepayers out 20, 30, 40 years. We think it's more fiscally sound to spread that expense out over time and let the users of the system that are going to enjoy those improvements help pay for those and not pay them with cash by today's users. With interest rates so low and the city bond rating improving at this time, we think the financing option to complete, we think the use of the financing option to complete this work is a sound decision. It'll never be this inexpensive again. There are many aspects of the Raftellus study that create questions as the best way to move forward. I've only spoken to a couple issues here. What can't be questioned is that the city is facing a problem that will only get worse if we do not address it now. As I stated earlier, we do not want to see our costs increase any more than any of the residential users do. We do, however, support the work required to maintain a solid supply of water. To the extent the city uses the funds generated in this increase to improve the delivery system towards a reduction in breaks and an improvement in quality, we can support this increase in costs. We don't like it, but we feel it's necessary at this time with the situation we have with our infrastructure. It's our hope that with this proposed rate increase, we can begin to improve the delivery system and continue to provide competitively priced water to researchers and the other users on the system.
Okay, do you have a comment to close, or we need additional time?
Well, I think this is an even-handed approach, and it'll allow us to grow our employment base, expand our population, and grow our local economy with both new businesses locating here and the organic growth like you have seen here with research. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, we're back to discussion. Councilman Schmidt.
Yeah, I've got a question for either of the Dougs could answer this. Our water main problem and our water main break rate, how does that compare to the national average?
Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Mayor, one of the slides we ran through in the presentation shows, I didn't highlight that very well, but it shows that the national average is about 25 breaks per 100 miles.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah, I
At the bottom.
didn't highlight that very well, so my presentation skills are actually regressing, despite comments to the contrary. And so, for example, as you look back, you can see that at one point it spiked to 120 breaks per 100 miles. This year, it's down around, slightly less than 80, between closer to 70 probably per 100 miles. So, in any case, we're significantly above the national average.
Thank you, and that's the reason I asked that question is because I knew we were significantly above the national average, and between 2011 and 2013, the city of Topeka spent over $10 million repairing broken mains only, just on broken mains. We also spent another little over $4 million on various infrastructure repairs that were not directly main related, but could be water meters or other kinds of issues. That's $14 million that we're spending fixing a broken system. We need to do something about this system. We're talking about comparing our rates versus the average rate comparison, but we don't have an average system here. We have a system that is fatally flawed, and we need to do something that's going to give us the kind of capital to make these initial investments, because these initial investments, while this does hurt now, while a 6% increase next year is a painful increase, that 6% increase is something that's going to benefit this community by paying off or by paying for some of these improvements for 20, 30, 50 years out, or 100 years out. We're repairing 100-year-old water mains in downtown Topeka right now. Those are long-term benefits. We can delay this and we can slow it down, but every time we do that, we're just creating more problems for ourselves, because we're creating a worse situation than the one we currently face. So I support what we've put together so far. I think it's a fair race. It's a tough pill to swallow across all of these classes. Nobody is happy about getting this kind of rate increase, but I think it's important that our rate increase reflect the condition of our current infrastructure. And while I and I'm sure everybody else feels for the fact that we're going to be raising rates on everybody, and the pain that those people are going to experience, our rates need to reflect in our approach. And as Mr. Gerber said, this is a 25% approach. There's a lot more that needs to go into this, but this is a problem that we need to address now before it becomes even worse than what is already a really bad problem. So I think we need to move forward with this. I support the rate infrastructure as it's proposed right now. The only issues I would have with it, and this was brought up by Ms. Hiller, is the rebate program. I think we need to expand. This is going to be a hit for a lot of people. Expansion of the rebate program at the bottom allows us to keep rates that are reflective of the true cost of the system and the cost of maintaining the system, while at the same time benefiting those who have little means to deal with that rate increase. I think that's about all of the notes I had on here, so I will yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Other comments? Councilman Brown.
Mr. Mayor, I kind of wanted to wait till we had a full discussion on the current rate proposal. If it's appropriate, I'd like to just talk
Certainly.
about that now.
Yeah, please proceed.
I have provided a slight adjustment to the basic 6.55% proposal. I thought it was a very good start for where we're at, but I also have the same concerns with the Gerber families and the low-income families, and I see an impact that if we don't address it as part of what we're doing, it is going to create some additional hardship on families that are already experiencing that. So to be brief, basically what I have done is, instead of a 6.55% increase, which although the percentage is equal, the effect on the classes is not, due to the difference in the rates. So if you look on 2015, 2016, and 2017, basically, if I was going to name it something, it would be the 17, 16, 15, with the residential, single-family residential, commercial, and industrial being the three categories that I was highlighting. I want to also thank Mr. Gerber for the time that he's given me the last couple of weeks as I've worked through this, he and other members of his staff. During that discussion, it was mentioned that we do have this separate rate class for multifamily residential, but yet I wasn't given a good explanation for why we need that separate class. And, maybe I'm just haven't been enlightened, but basically these are the same folks that are in a single-family residential, but they're in a different class. There's a smaller number. So as you look across, I thought it appropriate to move those folks up over time to the same rate as a single-family residential. And also an adjustment on the increase on the irrigation is actually slightly lower than in the 655 plan. And what we would end up with would be potentially 3 rate classes, residential, commercial, and industrial, if the city chose to go in that direction. And as far as revenue funding, the numbers are pretty well equal. I believe, Mr. Gerber, is that correct?
Yes, they appear to be.
All right. So that's basically my proposal. It only would affect the part of the 655 that had to do with the volume charge within the city.
I'm sorry, would you say that again?
My change would be only affecting the volume charge within the city. That's, everything else would be the same as the 655 proposal. Whatever we do, I think, I really want to commend staff for what they've done to try to find the middle ground. And I don't fault Mr. Gerber, but I think he was kind of getting his chops through the public meetings. And I don't think it really came across that for a lot of users over the course of the 3 years, the low volume users, there would actually, with the change in the base rate, there would be actually probably a decrease in their bill, a fairly significant decrease, and that would disappear over time, but it pretty well equals out to a neutral. And so I've included some examples of that for you. And the only other thing I wanted to talk about, and I was glad to hear Councilwoman Hiller and Councilman Schmidt mention it, in regards to the rebate program. That's another area that I spoke with Mr. Herber extensively about, and I'm by no means an expert yet, but I really think it's appropriate and necessary while we're going through this process to look at that, to do a review of effectiveness and the scope of the utility assistance programs that we have in place, so that as we go forward, we continue to support those that most need it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And actually, just to clarify then, we have one sheet here that has brown in the upper left-hand corner, and then these 3 are supportive, more detailed.
Those are just
of your
supportive
proposal.
documents of the cost to, say, a 1,000-gallon user, a 4,200-gallon user, and a 10,000-gallon user, would show what increase or decrease they would see over the course of the 3 years.
Okay, good enough, thank you. Other council members. Mr. Manspeaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may be so bold, I believe the time frame that we're working with here is about 3 years ago. We turned down the water rate increase. This body did. So then I called for a cost of service analysis, which is the study that's been referred to several times this evening. That cost of service analysis revealed that residential users and families basically were paying a higher rate than industrial and commercial users. We've sort of danced around that topic this evening, but I think that that's our problem. As folks sitting in our residential neighborhoods wonder why their water mains are breaking because they paid to build water mains for the Mars plant, because they paid to build water infrastructure for Reesers, because they built a $6 million water tower near Montera to help put water towards the Mars plant. These are costs that have to be paid by someone. As they're being paid right now, they're being paid by grandmothers. They're being paid by people who are on fixed incomes. They're being paid by people who frankly can't afford it. Just the internet's an amazing tool because you can look and see what anybody's water rates are pretty much across the entire country. So I just pulled up Beaverton, Oregon's. I would love to have Beaverton, Oregon's water rates. They charge $287 per unit, a unit being 748 gallons or 100 cubic feet. That's for everybody. One rate across the board for everyone. Industrial, commercial, residential. There are meter costs for the size of the meter, and those vary based upon size. But the top cap for the meter cost is $291 for an 8-inch meter. So it seems like Beaverton has a little bit better, more equitable program than what we're currently proposing. I would encourage my colleagues to look to the original plan, which I was told about when the study came back, and that was to raise rates on industrial and heavy commercial users. That plan quickly went away when it was taken out to the business community and promoted to them, and we were brought back to this plan right here because we had to sort of redefine what direction we wanted to head. I don't think this is a direction my constituency wants to head. I think my constituents don't understand why their water mains are breaking. They don't understand where the money goes when they pay their utility rates, and I don't think they would be very happy at all to know that it goes to make sure that businesses can be successful. I wish, as I imagine many businesses would wish, that they could stand up here and argue the fixed cost of one of their raw materials, but the reality is that they choose to use that raw material in the production of their goods. That shouldn't fall on the back of our poorest residents. Pretty basic, pretty simple. I would look for us to increase the rates on commercial and industrial users and leave the rates on residential users alone. Thank you.
And just a point to clarify, making the water mains out to the Mars plant was paid for by economic development funds rather than
Point of order.
for the,
It was not paid by economic development funds. It was paid by water funds. It was paid by rates. It wasn't paid by the money that we sent to go to Topeka or Jetto. Those mains, I sat here and asked that question, is this main being built for Mars? I was told by staff that no, it wasn't. It was being built for Montara. Well, why does Montara need a 36-inch water main? Duplication. That's what we were told. So I appreciate your point, Mr. Mayor, but this is an ideological and political stance. You and I may disagree on that, but it still remains the same.
well, just to clarify, from the city going to the Mars plant was paid for by economic development funds, not from south of Montero on out. Okay, yes, Mrs. Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I should know this, Mr. Gerber, right? Correct? Thank you for letting us use your family to beat up on with all the kids and all of that. What I hear from my constituents is they want to be charged what they use. They don't want to be in that window of 1,000 or 15 or whatever it is. They want to be charged of what they use. So I do like your plan. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? This completes the discussion. Is there any final comments wants to make? I don't know if this gave you direction or some idea of feelings from the council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. We do appreciate Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do appreciate the input that we received both from council and also from constituents. There have been a lot of meetings. What we'd like to do at this point is go back, compare our notes, and then continue to meet and then bring this forward for further discussion and direction from you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Schmidt.
Yeah, I was wondering if we could get these, it appears that on Mr. Brown's examples, he gave us 3 examples of a small, medium, and large residential water user and the impact. Can we have those done for industrial, commercial, multifamily rates also? That with his proposal?
So you'd like a rough out of these with
For
our
each rate
proposed
class.
our proposed numbers, or with Mr. Brown's?
With Mr. Brown's proposal numbers, what would be a small industrial class, a medium industrial class, and a large industrial class, commercial, et cetera?
Yes.
Other questions, comments? I'm sorry, Mr. Liesla.
I just want to send my appreciation to staff and to the body tonight. these conversations are difficult conversations to have because of the implications that they have both on the constituency and on the industry as well. However, if we're not having these conversations, we're not moving our city forward. Mr. Brown, thank you so much for this analysis. Mr. Gerber, thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation. Very easy to understand, very easy to follow. I hope that people that were watching this at home were able to appreciate that, and I hope to hear more with regards to the feedback that the public has after having an opportunity to listen to this tonight. So thank you to everybody for your comments.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Those are good comments. Seeing none, no more. We complete the non-action item. We will proceed to announcements. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Your Honor. So the first thing I'd like to do is make a very public thank you to Lamar Advertising. They have generously posted 4 electronic billboards throughout the city to honor fallen police officer Corporal Jason Harwood and the Topeka Police Department. They're up now. They're located at 21st and Chelsea, 6th and Topeka, or 29th and Topeka, sorry, and 21st and Gage. They're very cool. And it's quite an honor and reflects well the commitment that this community has to supporting this very difficult situation. Second, and this is very exciting, is we're going to have the swearing in of the new police chief, James L. Brown, on Wednesday, October 1st at 10 o'clock at the Law Enforcement Center, and everybody's invited to come if they want to participate. And then I'll put the last 2 things into kind of very cool things. So as I have gotten to know Topeka in my beginning third year here, you just run into some really cool things, and I ran into one this week out at the Confederate Air Museum. I walked in there just to walk around and introduce myself and see what they have there, and there's this model of the Oriskany, which was a aircraft carrier that ran from 1945, was decommissioned in 57, was recommissioned in 59, and then just retired in 76. But the artwork there was just really cool. So I encourage people to go out and see it. Rarely do you see some craft work done that well with this model. And I also want to recognize Mr. Fyander. He is the proud dad of the Topeka High School place kicker. By the way, that's his daughter. Ruth is the sophomore kicker for Topeka High School, and I believe that she has. I don't know the statistics, but I believe she's probably kicked 8 out of 9 for the last 2 games, point after touchdowns. Thank you.
Thank you for asking.
I finish.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Councilmember Brown.
Well, I don't have much tonight. I just would like to welcome Councilwoman Ortiz back and wish her family well.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I wanted to talk about or announce the drug take-back for this Saturday. And I wanted to read, this is the National Drug Take-Back Day, and it's coordinated by the Federal Drug Enforcement Administration, which collects and safely destroys the medication. And it has the local drop-off location will be from 10 to 2 Saturday at the Topeka Police Department and also at the Mission Township. And I just wanted to read a couple more things, if I may. Studies show a majority of abused prescription drugs are obtained from family and friends, including from home medicine cabinets. And it said unused medications are dangerous for kids, pets, and the environment. And it talks about let's not put them down the stool. And people are cautioned not to flush unused drugs down the toilet or throw them in the trash, as both methods pose potential safety and health hazards. I'll have to tell Angela and Amber to make sure that they blow that up next time they print that for me. Thank you. And then I just wanted to say to the mayor and Anita Woolgas, the city manager and staff, Local 83, my colleagues, city council members, constituents, thanks for the flowers, the cards, the phone calls, and support that you showed me during my father's passing. It's unmeasurable, but well appreciated, and I just appreciate all the love and support. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman De La Isla.
Short comment, I just want to welcome to District 5, the upcoming Madalizas. We're gonna have a brand-new business that is coming over to Brookwood, so just want to congratulate them and welcome to our neck of the woods.
Thank you. Councilman Manspeaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I'm sitting here, I was getting text messages from my wife of pictures of my son with airplanes out at Billard Airport. The Kansas Aviation Expo is in town, and a friend invited us out to see the planes and learn a little bit about aeronautics. Obviously, I wasn't able to make it, but my 3-year-old son definitely enjoyed himself, it looked like. I didn't say anything about the nudity issue because my colleague quickly sent it to committee, and I supported that move. I would have supported tabling indefinitely. The reality is that I think this is a solution searching for a problem, and I've heard that repeatedly from my constituents and the people that I've talked to about this. When we talk about the idea of stopping and conversing with someone who is naked, what we actually mean is stopping and arresting them or issuing them a ticket or a fine. My concern is that there are lots of ways to interact with somebody when they're just walking down the street. We need probable cause, obviously, to interact with them in a law enforcement way, but a hi, how are you? There's nothing against that. There's no law against a cop saying that to a private individual. And sometimes that can lead to a lot of other conversations. So I feel like what we're doing here is we're trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist. And the concern that I have is, well, there's several. The first would be constitutional. I don't think the language of this ordinance would stand up constitutionally. And it may have, or I mean, it may stand as law in a couple of cities in our community right now, but have they been tested? Specifically, when you have 2 standards, one for male and one for female, I feel like there's an unbalance within the law, and we really shouldn't pass regulations that identify males and females separately. I think that we should see each other as equals and define the law based upon that equality. And I think generally when we do something like this, we're sort of asking for a lawsuit. One of the things that the city of Topeka sort of has the ominous moniker of is that we sort of lead laws and set direction for the entire state because the capital's here. So Wichita can pass a law, Hutchinson can pass a law, that's all fine and dandy, but then when we pass that law, it creates some type of controversy that then becomes attacked and then opens ourselves up for litigious attacks. So I would be concerned about that aspect. I also believe that it limits speech, though I may not agree with the use of public nudity in forms of political and artistic speech. It may not be my thing, it is some people's thing, and I would not want to limit that upon them to express themselves in a free and open way. I also think that this has unintended consequences, and that one of the speakers spoke to the unintended consequences. I think that is the number one thing that all elected officials should pay attention to when passing regulation. The concern specifically that I have is, what about a victim of sexual assault? If they're found in public naked, are they now to be fined? What about someone who's suffering from a psychotic break, who is clearly mentally ill? If they are found naked, now they're going to be fined, which probably will only further compound their mental problems. What about an individual who's a substance abuser and who is loose on our streets, high on whatever? I think if we talk to our beat cops about the amount of naked people they encounter on a regular basis, they would tell you that they do. But they would also probably tell you they fall under one of those 3 categories. They're on substances, they're off their meds, they're whatever. I don't know that punishing those people solves anything. I think what it actually does is just gives us another encumbrance to go after folks and not protect our citizens. I think if we want to solve this problem, and I kind of wish it would have went to a vote, because I was going to make a substitute motion in which we ban shame so that nobody in this community could feel shame. And then we'd all be free and sort of much more easier living in Topeka, Kansas. But the reality is that everybody is different. And how people want to express themselves is different. And how they live in our community is different. And we don't have a right to not be offended by people's expression. But we do have a right to protect people's right to it. And the reality, I said to a buddy, I said I was torn on this issue because this is how I truly felt, and I wanted to make sure that my constituency felt this way before I voiced these concerns. And this is really the email that I've gotten. But I voiced my concern to a friend, and he said, well, how would you feel if your daughter encountered somebody who was naked? If someone was exposing themselves to my daughter in a lewd and lascivious, I can't even say that word, lascivious way, there's a law for that. If somebody's trucking down the street naked for whatever reason, stuff happens. I don't think we should send them to jail. Thank you.
Councilwoman Schwartz.
Thank you. I'll try and be brief. I was going through my desk and I found the Best of Topeka and forgot to mention when this came out that the Topeka Zoo was listed as the best family entertainment. And so I wanted to encourage people, this weekend is the Zubilee, and to go out and support our zoo. I want to take back our city from crime, and this past week I attended out of my own pocket a conference by Florence Crittenden on trauma by violence. And I highly recommend, the community getting behind our social service programs that are trying to do this. I'm going to a KCSL, Kansas Children's Service League, breakfast tomorrow morning. And then I noticed that Vallejo is having their ribbon cutting next week for their new crisis center. So I really want to get the community behind these efforts. Last night I spoke to a Boy Scout troop at Faith Lutheran, and I encourage more troops and more social programs across Topeka to ask the civic leaders to come and speak. And then the last thing I want to say is I wish you all a happy new year. And the Jewish year, tomorrow is Rosh Hashanah, and it is the Hebrew year of 5775. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Schmidt, Councilman Harmon, Councilwoman Hiller.
There's lots going on. I wanted to bring a poster along of just one thing. The Aaron Douglas Art Fair is this Saturday at the Aaron Douglas Art Park just behind Dillon's at 12th and Lane. And this year they've broken 50 artists, which is pretty much the capacity for that park from a start when they had, I think it was 19 the very first year. So it's all volunteer done. It's a free fair. There are artists. There's interactive art for grown-ups. There's a huge tent with art for kids and neighborhood-based, a big music stage with kind of your fair music, legacy stage, which is an acoustic stage, all local artists of various genres, obviously, and then community-based and neighborhood groups doing food booths, none of which cost more than $5. So see you there. There will be voter registration this year as well, available through the fair, and I'm really proud of them for that. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have no public comment tonight. There being no further business, the meeting is adjourned.
Are you going on the intercity route? Yes. I am.